Hey, what's going on? You're now tuned in to PVD Horror Radio. I'm Brandon, and I'm joined by my co-host Dave. Today we're gonna sit there and this is something new. This is PVD Horror Radio. This is where we're gonna take our love for horror and our love for music and incorporate the two into this crazy series, and we're gonna have fun with this and then kind of like take it on a different journey from what you're normally used to listening to us on,
Yeah.
like just
Yep.
talking about horror films. Today we're gonna sit there and we're gonna talk about this subgenre of horrorcore. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
myself, Dave, we grew up on this stuff. You know what I mean? And it wasn't always just in your face how it can be today. But there's so many different levels of how people interpret like what horrorcore is.
Hmm.
And today I just want to kind of like throw that out there. Like we're not like going so deep into it like that we're professionals of hardcore because I see so many people in discussions talking about that person's not hardcore, this person didn't start it. Like we're not doing that today. We're just
Yeah.
talking about everything and having a good time and kind of like giving some people that don't know about hardcore something to kind of learn because it's just not a genre that's for everyone. So
Yeah. I actually, when we get to like listing some of our favorite horrorcore artists or albums, I had a couple that I was going to throw out there that I didn't really see listed as horrorcore, but I would
yeah.
personally consider them horrorcore, or at least the albums themselves were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Brandon, let me ask you. So, you like, we've been talking about doing this for a while. We both are huge music enthusiasts. So, like, this is obviously something that just made sense for us. But
Yeah.
what made you want to start with horrorcore?
For me, for hardcore, it just made sense because it's just like, okay, fine. Like, how do we transition into, the PVD Horror Radio brand? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
we get it started? How can we incorporate it? What's the easiest thing? And it's like, okay, hardcore. Horror, like, what I mean, horror movie lyrics and everything like that. It was just the easiest way,
Yeah.
so
Well, and the other thing, like, I'm glad you started with this
mhm.
because this is something that kind of like separates us from other horror fans. And not to say
Yeah.
that like we don't dabble, because we both dabble in like all genres. Like, I,
Yeah.
except for country, I pretty much will listen to anything. I think you are the same way. Like, our tastes go wide and abroad, but a
Hmm.
lot of horror fans are kind of stereotyped as being like into metal, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's actually a genre that I'm pretty ignorant of. Like, I'm not huge into metal. Like, I couldn't name a bunch of metal bands or horror metal bands. But horrorcore I could absolutely, because I've always grown up definitely gravitating more towards like hip hop and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I would assume you're probably in the same boat.
That's the thing. For me, I can listen to all music, what I mean? Because it
Mhm.
just becomes to a point I want to say, I try to let my kids know, like, listen to everything, expand your collection of everything because some things get stale, you know what I mean? Things get
Yeah.
old. So even country, like I listen to that, you know what I mean? I've listened to like metal. I can't, like you said, I can't name so many bands or anything like that,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to be like, well, I don't listen to that. I'll give everything a shot. And so that's also why I want to incorporate, music into this. We've been incorporated at pieces and stuff like that where we would have interviews and I would kind of talk to some of our guests and say, hey, can you kind of like throw some songs out there that
Yeah.
inspired you or helped you through this project or life, you know what I mean? And so that was cool, and that was something that we always wanted to kind of get into. And like you said, myself, we talk about music all the time. It's movies and music, so
Yeah.
it's like, okay, how can we do something to kind of like keep PVD horror going a little bit stronger, gain some more listeners, because it's just like I don't want to, some people just don't want to hear about movies all the time. They might want to just hear about music. And so it's like, all
Yeah.
right, let's do something different.
You can't be one dimensional in this game, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree. I agree. So we are just a few years apart.
Yeah.
I am your elder, but we're just a few years apart. um, so a lot of the music that I remember listening to, I know that you're pretty much on the same page.
Yeah.
However, when I was doing some research on horrorcore, there was a lot of people that came up, and like when I'm gonna research something, I dive in. I don't just
Yeah.
like surface level. So I started to listen to some extra music that I hadn't really, just so I kind of got a good idea of what we were going to be talking about. There
Hmm.
was a bunch of actual like horrorcore artists that I'd never heard of. Did you have the same experience when you were researching about this?
Yeah. And then a lot were, it's like I said, it's a touchy topic for like true horrorcore fans because you'll see some names that'll pop up, and then the real horrorcore fans be like, that person's not horrorcore
Yeah.
because someone made a song, one song or something or two songs with lyrics that kind of
Mm.
touch on horrorcore, but I feel as though that from my point of view, it's kind of hard because they can sit back and they can look at some songs that released, like the first two songs or stuff like that, or kind of putting in, let's see, like Will Smith, you know what I mean, talking about the Freddy Krueger
Yeah.
song, you know what I mean, or the Fat Boys. You wouldn't really call them horrorcore. They made a song, but they're known for being, one of the first people to kind of like put out like those lyrics and stuff like that at times. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
would,
so they kind of were the ones who introduced
yeah.
darker content into hip hop. Like
Hmm.
there's always been dark content in music. Like that's not nothing new, but to put it in hip hop,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Nightmare on what was it, Nightmare on My Street or
Yeah.
and the Fat Boys, Are You Ready for Freddy are two of like the early influences in that movement. And also there's I never heard of him, Jimmy Spicer. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm
Yep.
gonna get a lot of flack for not knowing him, but he had Adventures of Super Rhyme, which
Yep.
is like also another like super early addition. So Brandon, before we get into it, I guess, do you want to just define what horrorcore is?
Yeah. So horrorcore is a subgenre of hardcore rap, with themes like death, violence, and slasher films, and like Satan worship. It's just so many like different things. It's just like talking to you, saying, "Hey, what do you think horrorcore is?" Like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, it's
Yep.
so I feel as though it can go by whatever the person kind of feels. You know what I mean? Because like I said, horrorcore is like really touchy subgenre where, I don't want to sit there and come off, like you said, ignorant about, someone's talent or someone's, the way that they want to express themselves, how they do it. And so you don't want to get anything wrong with that. But it's kind of like horror films. Like when we grew up, they were always going through so many things where like they were being banned, so we
Yeah.
talk about the video nasties. So this is video nasties of like music, so
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's such a wide range. Like it can go from like funny songs,
yeah,
like we'll talk about ICP, I'm pretty sure,
yeah,
to like really dark and, almost scary kind of music. So it's pretty broad, but it's all just like content that's dark and horrific, I guess you would say.
yeah.
Um, so kind of started in the 80s,
Yep,
like we said, that Jimmy Spicer, uh, DJ Jazzy Jeff, and the Fresh Prince, which is crazy to even include them in a conversation
exactly.
like this. And the Fat Boys, they're all kind of like early influences in adding
Hmm.
in horror content into hip hop. Um, but then kind of coming out of that, also we get the Ghetto Boys.
Yeah,
So that's interesting because I never really thought of them as horrorcore, but every like October you always hear My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me and
yep,
stuff like that. So like that's a song that's always going to get some airplay when we're talking about like horror rap or anything like that. So
yeah,
um
definitely. Because that was always the main thing, like for me growing up, that video, and just watching it.
yep.
And you got Bushwick Bill with the, with the Jason mask
Yeah.
on and stuff, and like coming
Yeah.
out from the tree and hitting the ground. Um, yeah, definitely, growing up in the 90s, like I said, like, you're a little bit older than me. So, a lot of those things, like so the the first song that first came out, I wasn't really like hooked to it because it was like I didn't know about it. But you see Fresh Prince and you see the
Yep.
Ghetto Boys, that's what caught my attention at that time. And then like you brought up the Insane Clown Posse, but another group that stood out to me was 3 6 Mafia down the
Mm,
road. You know what I
yep.
mean? So that
Yep.
that was cool. And you had so many other, you know, groups that came on, and I know Gravediggaz was one of your favorites, and
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
talked about that with Destroy from Shade 45 when he came on,
Yeah.
and we talked about like the history of a horrorcore for a little bit, but everyone has their own their views on it.
Yeah. So yeah, Gravediggaz was 100% like my introduction into horrorcore. I
Yeah,
didn't really know that rap could have like a horror side to it other than just like, like the Will Smith song.
Yeah.
So when I discovered Gravediggaz, I was just like, it was like finding this treasure. And then like I listened to that album so many freaking times, 6 feet deep. Like I love that because I was already a fan of Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
So the fact that RZA had this offshoot just absolutely blew my mind. I love that album. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But there's so many other people that like around that time I never really thought of in the same realm. But now I look back and I'm like, so for example, Bone Thugs, that
Yeah, Bone Thugs. Yep.
East Eternal 99, that album is so dark.
Yeah.
And just there's so many. I wrote down a couple of the tracks that were particularly like Mr. Ouija 2, Mo Murda, those like the songs were just so like all themed dark and just like had this like undertone of like they could be a horror soundtrack, like a hip
Yeah.
hop horror soundtrack. I love
Hmm.
that album. I don't know. Were you a fan of Bone Thugs at all?
Yeah, definitely. Growing up, those guys definitely stood out to me. And then so that's the thing. It's like when these guys came in, a lot of these artists came in, their underground style was horrorcore, but then
Yeah.
they were able to take it and become, bigger artists. And then so they had to kind of like even out the playing field of, okay, we have to sit there and make music for kind of like everyone. Like this, we can't just sit there and just make just hardcore music. And then so that's the thing with horrorcore. A lot of people come in with that style, but they tend to gravitate towards, more the commercial success, how they can sit there and sell more records. And so um
That's a like a perfectly said statement as far as Bone Thugs.
yeah,
The original Crossroads song on that album is not the Crossroads song that everybody knows and loves.
yeah,
They did like a more commercialized version of it that's like really almost like poppier, I guess you would say, and like
yeah,
more bright. And that's the version that you hear on the radio all the time. So yeah, I mean, because obviously nothing on that album other than First of the Month really got any radio play.
yeah,
So when they're yeah, that album's great. If anyone's not familiar with that album, I 100% encourage people to check that one out.
yeah. And so like, the style, there's so many like you said, there's so many things that people can sit there and kind of throw out on like where was it created? But it's, there's a lot of people say it happened in Detroit or
Yep.
Memphis, but it's everyone, I think they gravitate towards different styles and they kind of made it their own. I feel like a lot of people like what Esham, he was a big Detroit rapper
Mhm.
and he inspired so many other people that actually kind of got into the game. So that's how like, Insane Clown Posse and like Eminem, like big
Yep.
names like that got
Yep.
into like horrorcore. Um, but yeah, like, and that's what I was saying before, like, when you have so much success as a rapper starting off, but when you're underground and then it's like, how can I take this mainstream? But, a lot of people probably have a little bit of hate on it. But I think that, in this topic, when you talk about it, Eminem's probably like one of the biggest hardcore rappers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
made it that, took it to another level with his first two albums and then even like Relapse. I think that kind of is kind of
There's some songs on there that are like specifically
yeah,
titled and themed in the horrorcore, but I think it almost like starts to dabble in a little bit of like horrorcore, but then non-horrorcore.
yeah.
The Slim Shady LP for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs on there that yeah, I like, and it's funny, it's like I never really thought about him in the realm of horrorcore, but there's I thought I had made a list of some of the tracks on there, but like yeah, like everything is about murder,
Yeah.
just like super dark stuff.
Yeah, killing his wife
Yeah,
and mom and stuff like that. It's just all different levels. And I think that that's where, murder horrorcore really just kind of like took off from because it's just like what can I do to kind of like get this person to like feel a certain way and just like wow for shock value, you know what I mean? I
yeah,
think that
yeah,
that's what this is all about. And so it's like we said, it's like a horror movie on lyrics, you know what I mean? On
yep,
on beats and everything like that. How can I sit there and take us to the next level? Because I already brought that up when we were talking about like just the films and how they were getting so many reviews and how it was always on 2020, how horror is, you know
Yeah.
taking over and being a bad thing for kids to watch. They shouldn't be watching it and stuff like that. And so the music industry was the same way. Like, how can we do this?
Yeah. Do you know who claims to have invented horrorcore?
See, that's the thing, man. It's like so many people have their own thing. So it's like
Yeah.
I hear so many things, and I want to hear who do you?
So Cool Keith claims that he invented the
Okay,
horrorcore genre, and I guess it was like built on like his '96 album, Doctor Octa. I'm gonna try and say this, Doctor Octa gynecologist. I don't know,
okay.
something along those lines. But I guess he kind of tries taking some credit for inventing the genre. I don't know
And
what people would think about that, but that's an interesting thing. I kind of feel like it was already built before that, but
yeah, I think that no matter what, that's why I'm saying it's a touchy subject because no matter what, no one, everyone's gonna sit there and think that, they did this and did that. And I don't want to take it away from anyone, you know what I mean? If
yeah,
if they feel as though, hey, you did that first, it's kind of like that same situation that we were conversation that we had a couple months back about what was the first found footage film. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
And so it's like, whoever is gonna sit there and say something is just gonna get this conversation going, putting it out there. Like I sit there and say, I started podcasting. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
gonna sit there and get the table rolling, like, oh, you heard about Brandon? He said that he started podcasting. It's like, all right, whatever.
yeah,
But it's entertainment value and stuff like that. But I think that overall it's cool because I feel as though that all artists kind of like build it up. And then it kind of sucks because it's like you have so many people that say, well, this isn't horrorcore and that isn't horrorcore, or what I mean, this is what it is. But I feel as though that no matter what, if you're rapping about anything horror related, kind of like Will Smith and them did, it's like the
yep.
same shit. You know what I mean? Because I was actually listening to DMX, Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood.
Oh, this is
That
that's a dark
is
album.
that's a dark album.
Yeah,
And you know what I mean? And so it's like
yeah,
because you got Marilyn Manson on there, you got him like talking about like the Omen, and then you have fans that will say, well, he's not horrorcore. But
yeah. That's a good example of something that has completely dark themes. He
yeah.
doesn't come out and say I'm
No, yeah.
horrorcore, but like, why wouldn't you lump that in if you were thinking about like stuff that fits into that genre?
Yeah.
There's an Ice Cube album too that fits into horrorcore, and I can't remember exactly which one it is. It's one of the ones from late '90s, early 2000s,
Yeah.
where he gets kind of dark too. There's a lot of people who dabbled in it.
Yeah.
Um, one of my favorite albums, not a super popular one, but Cypress Hills 3 Temples of Boom
Yeah.
is, in my opinion, like definitely horrorcore. It's the entire album is just super, like, again, I'm like, I really like when it's like got a really dark atmosphere, though, like the whole thing. That was actually released on Halloween of '95. So I mean, it doesn't get more horrorcore than that.
Okay.
And there's songs like No Rest for the Wicked, Boom Biddy Bye Bye, and Illusions.
Hmm.
Those are all like 3 tracks that I would say, if I'm going to try to prove it, like win an argument about if this is horrorcore, listen to those 3 tracks and then get back to me. I'm pretty sure you'll be convinced as well. Brand, are you familiar with that album at all?
Yeah. Yep.
That I spent an entire summer listening to. That was, yeah, that just reminds me of, man, I was a dark kid at some point in time. Like, I just love that album. Not the '90s, mid '90s, there was so much good music at that time. Like, I feel like this was probably around the time I was getting into like the Machiavelli Tupac album came
Yep.
out around that time. This was there. DJ Muggs had a new like mixtape album. There's like so many good albums coming out around that time. That like this, I was glad to do this research because I was like looking back, I was like, damn, I gotta go revisit that album. I haven't listened
Yeah.
to that in a minute. Um, so the '90s definitely, like, while we see the influences in the '80s, the '90s definitely kind of like surge. So it's almost like the '80s shaped horrorcore. The '90s really like surged it with a lot of artists coming out with albums, a lot of new artists coming out of the woodwork.
Hmm.
In this, you see, like you said, Insane Clown Posse. There's a few artists that I wasn't really familiar with, but I listened to recently, and they're, I definitely enjoyed it. Flatliners,
Yep.
Mars, and Necro. Those are just some of the popular names, plus everybody that came out of Detroit, like you mentioned, like Eminem and numerous other people.
Yeah.
But then after that, we start to see the internet, and obviously, that brings on all new opportunities for artists to come out and like get onto like SoundCloud and all that other stuff. But there's this mixtape that comes out. Like obviously, you were talking about the Detroit connection with horrorcore, but this Devil's Night mixtape. Have you ever heard any of those?
No, no, I haven't checked that
I
out.
so I heard one last year and I was like, oh shit, I didn't even know this existed. I think they've been doing them since I don't quote me on this. I think it's been like since 2012 or 2013, or maybe even
Okay,
longer than that. But it comes out every year around Halloween time, and it's just a mixtape of horrorcore. So it's definitely something for people to look forward to every Halloween.
that's
But
dope.
that's all Detroit based hip hop, I believe, is
Mhm.
kind of the theme there.
Yeah, there's a
So
lot of
yeah, that's where
uh,
we're at today with horrorcore and like kind of the popularity of it.
yeah, there's a lot of big names, like, we can continue to keep going on. I don't want to sit there and like say that we're just gonna get every name, you know what I mean? But there's artists like, like Tech Nine, Brother Lynch, Hung, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it just goes on and on. And so basically this episode, we're just kind of sitting there just talking about it to kind of like give a feel out there for our listeners that, that had no idea that this stuff was kind of like out there. So it's just like, hey, we want to check it out. There's so many other ways. And so I also wanted to kind of bring up too, because you're a big fan of Tyler the Creator and everyone like that when they first came out, uh, you know, they had that horrorcore style, that whole Odd
Yonker
Future camp, Yonkers,
Yonkers.
all that
Yeah.
shit, Goblin, that album, he was just talking about killing people, eating bugs, and doing all this other weird shit. But
Yeah.
that's how you get that start, you come in there, you want to come into the game, like how can I sit there and like separate myself from like what's going on? How can I get so many eyes on me? You know what I mean? They came in, they had the upside down crosses,
Hmm.
worshiping the devil, and it's like that's the type of stuff that attracts you into it because you're like, what the fuck are these dudes doing?
Yeah.
What are they doing? Like, let me listen to what they're doing, and it's just like, okay, that they're good, and then they're talking about all this crazy shit. They're keeping me, entertained. Like they're just taking shit to the next level and doing crazy shit. But like I said, they use that to get into the game, and then
Yeah.
you look at Odd Future now, they're not the same. You know what I mean? They're coming out with like so many you know R&B type songs
Yeah.
now. They're everywhere. You
A
got
few years back, people were giving Tyler the Creator shit because he was like happy on stage. People
yeah,
wanted him to be like dark and angry. And I guess they were like upset because he was like skipping around and smiling. And he's like, what? I can't be happy. He was like upset because he was getting pigeonholed.
yeah, because
Um,
that's the thing. He came
yeah.
on, he's just like, I'm not horrorcore. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's like, look, like, yeah, they took that whole setup that they had to get them into the game. And that was the thing too. It was like, when Frank Ocean came to the game, he was heavy with those guys, and it had to be like, okay, like you guys are on some other shit. Like right now, I got to sit there and distance myself, and because I'm going to like mainstream, like in a different way. So he had to kind of like back away from them, but they were
Yeah.
all still cool. But now you look at Odd Future and everything like that, you got everyone like Steve Lacy and everyone coming out of there.
Yeah.
And it's
Engagement.
crazy for where they are now.
Yeah.
So
I before people attack me, I got to correct myself. The Devil's Night mixtape is has been doing it since 2003, not 2013.
okay.
So that was
Yeah.
that was a big error right there. Um, but yeah, no, Tyler the Creator he was on my list, and I'll never forget when that video for Yonkers came out.
Yeah.
I think actually you and I were still working. I think we might have still been working together at the
Yeah, at the
time.
group home.
And I remember everybody was going around going, "Did you see this video? Did you see this video?" It was wild, right? I mean,
Yep.
to put those visuals on a video was like crazy at the time. And now it's like sort of tame, I guess. There's still the ending is like crazy that, there's, he hangs himself at the end.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like not super crazy, to today's standards, but definitely shock value.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's, but then you have artists that are, that are not trying to just be shock value. This is them. This is their life. And we're not trying to take that away from anyone. But, like you said, a lot of SoundCloud rappers, there's a lot of rappers in this subgenre now that I couldn't tell you anything about, but I respect it. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like you want to keep it you want to keep it moving. You want to sit there and rap about what you believe. And so you talked about that there was a lot of controversy and like things that's happening in the world that surrounded horrorcore. Do you want to sit there and like touch on a little bit of that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I found a few interesting stories. So in 96,
Hmm.
there was this guy, Joseph Edward, aka Bubba Galagos. He was an 18-year-old from Bayfield, Colorado, who killed his roommates after ingesting methamphetamine and listening to horrorcore rapper Brother Lynch Hung's song Locked to the Brain.
Mm.
And Brother Lynch Hung is also he's considered obviously one of the pioneers of horrorcore, but he even created his own horrorcore subcategory called Rip Gut,
Yeah.
which is known for graphic lyrics dealing with hardcore gore, torture, and cannibalism. So after attempting to kill his ex-girlfriend and taking two other students hostage, he was in turn was killed by the police. But he was said to be a huge fan of Brother Lynch Hung, and um, his minister suggested that the music he played had a role in the killings. And, obviously there was nothing to back that up, though, because he was dead. But
Yeah.
this is like obviously not the first time someone's tried blaming something on music or, some other thing. There was a person who was pulled over by police and killed the police and blamed listening to Tupacalypse Now as like the reason he committed those murders. So it's like not
Yeah.
the first time, but like this is definitely notable within the horrorcore um, genre. Then there was a school shooting with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, where they were said to have been um, influenced by ICP in
Yep.
'99.
Hmm.
So that obviously they were ICP denied that either of them were juggalos, but there was, this affiliation with one of them had a friend who was a juggalo. So there was suggested that maybe they could have been. Obviously, there's no way to, actually prove whether someone's influenced by the music or not. Um, there's in 2017, this is kind of crazy. The Denver Police Department has a guide that claims that even juggalos who are not affiliated with gangs are prone to commit murder, shootings, kidnapping, rape, necrophilia, cannibalism, assault, and arson, and that such acts give a juggalo a sense of pride and street credit amongst peers.
Mm.
This is in the Denver Police Department guide in 2017. This is like what this feels like so ancient, like that you wouldn't assume that would ever exist.
Yeah.
Uh, and then in 2005, there was a horrorcore fan, Jeff Wise, who committed the Red Lake Senior High School massacre. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that, but that's there's so many of those things that happen these days, unfortunately. And yeah, just that there's a number of these just random things that are all like that person was a fan of horrorcore rappers such as Mars and Prozac, so they connected obviously his listening to those things to that act. But it just kind of goes on and on where people are blaming the music that people are listening to the acts that they're committing.
Yeah. Like
Where do
we
you
said.
stand on that?
No, like I said, it's the same thing about the movies,
Yeah.
the entertainment, like, it's the same thing. Like, it did talk about it in Scream, where it was just like,
Yeah.
how everything kind of gets everything going. So I think that that's what's going on. You know, anything that you're watching and listening to can affect you, but
If
it's
you're someone who's like already maybe like
there. Yeah,
yeah,
already there.
if you're kind of already dealing with some mental health stuff or you're kind of got a personality where you can get obsessive into things, like that's going to make the difference versus like a different type of person listening or to
Yeah,
that kind of music. Like I've never listened to any like the Gravediggaz album and then immediately wanted to go commit murders. Like that's never a thought that's ever crossed my mind.
yeah.
um
And that's the thing, and in this episode, we're not promoting that stuff. You know what I mean? We're just touching on a subgenre that, also features, horror,
yes.
so
Yeah.
and things that happen in the world, because it's the same thing. Horror movies have given the same thing, like we said this so many times, it gives off the same vibe. But yeah,
I personally, and I'll probably get some flack for this, and I'm not even sure you probably would feel differently, I guess. I feel like video games are more dangerous than movies and music, personally, because I feel like you can actually get lost in a video game.
Mm. Well,
Just a thought I had, like, because I just feel like music is so like you can get lost in a song, but only so far, right? Because you're not
mm,
actually actively engaged in doing something. I'm
yeah.
not watching myself, kill a bunch of people on Call of Duty.
Yeah, and it's the same situation like we just said. It depends on if you're already there
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like if you're in that state of mind, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I don't get I can't sit there and speak for how what somebody else is going through, but like you said, I can't get lost or like if I'm playing a game because that was the main thing before, like Grand Theft Auto and all that stuff
hmm
like that was going on. And it was just like from me and you, if somebody like seeing that on the news and someone sits there and points that stuff out and says, well, this is because of this. And then like for me and you, it'd be like, well, that doesn't have the same effect on me.
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Like
So
I
it's just,
dabble in all that stuff too, man, and I never thought about doing that. So I
yeah,
know what
but
you're
that's the
saying.
thing, but there's people that do, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
obviously, if that's you or anything like that, like please reach out, try to get some help,
And stop
talk to
listening
someone.
to horrorcore immediately.
Yeah,
Because yeah, you don't need any other negative influences in your life.
yeah,
Maybe turn on some Taylor Swift.
yeah. And that's the thing, because like Eminem had to sit there and deal with a lot of that stuff. Like whenever everything happened, it goes against you and say that look, it's because of you. This is because of you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's so much shit that's going on in the world that people just
So you know what's interesting? Eminem attracted, like, when he first came out, he attracted like a lot of like different types of fans than
yeah.
typical hip hop, right? Like there was a lot of people who connected to his music for some reason,
Hmm.
that maybe weren't connecting to other types of hip hop. And I think that has something to do with it too. Like the types of people that he was attracting maybe were, inclined to do some of the things that they were trying to blame the music on.
Hmm.
So it just, yeah, I don't know. And it was also a very weird time. Like that point in time, we're also were dealing with like a lot of like aggressive music and people having a lot of aggression in general.
Hmm.
That was shortly after like Woodstock '99 and all that shit, where like people were just going nuts. Limp
Yeah.
Bizkit
And
and
you
stuff.
also
Yeah.
have to look at it too because it's like I was actually having this conversation with someone about how, say that like when we're going through things and everything like that, and if you're having you're listening to some certain type of music that helps you calm down.
Yeah.
Usually it's something like mellow, right? Something that helps soothe you.
Yeah.
But some people use metal to
Yes.
soothe. You know what I
And
mean?
I know, and I don't get that. I know exactly, like I know those types of people and I don't understand that. Me personally, if I'm feeling sad or upset, I put on something sort of depressing. I
Mm.
I don't get those people who like put on something that just amps them up, and like how that's going to be helpful, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. When I was probably like 18, something like that. I think that's what that type of music, I mean, I think like AFI and stuff like that. That
Yeah, yeah.
was like that music, like because it was just like, and you know what I mean? And it's just like just different that it was out of my element where it would be like, okay, fine, I'm not gonna sit there and listen to like Jay-Z right now because like
hmm
that's not my mood right now. I need something different that's gonna channel out and
Yeah.
kind of like take me to somewhere else to help me like soothe and like relax and stuff like that. So that's why for me just music just plays like a big different role because it's like certain things, certain artists, certain genres help me in a different moment than what my normal everyday music would do, so
Yeah.
depends on your day.
Absolutely. One of the moments, I think I brought this up on that episode when we were talking about horrorcore previously, but one of the moments that I thought was really cool was seeing um the Tales from the Crypt movie, Demon
Mm,
Knight, actually include a horrorcore song in the movie. So
yeah,
there's that scene with Jada Pinkett Smith, and then they start playing Gravediggaz. I think it's 1-800 Suicide they're playing in that scene.
yeah.
And that was just cool to kind of see the music that I was getting into, also in the movies I'm watching. And just, I feel like I wish that would have happened more often. And you didn't really see that crossover too much.
Well, I think they did on like some of the like you just brought up that that song was in the movie. A lot of those songs were actually on the soundtracks to the albums. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
that sometimes like if you go back and you look at it and you're like, oh shit, that actually was there.
That was
Um,
back when they used to also do separate soundtracks than the actual movie score.
yeah, yep.
That was a great time. Like
Oh yeah,
you would watch the movie and then you would buy like this separate soundtrack of
yep,
all like actual like good artists that
yeah,
made songs for it. That was cool. Like the
yep.
Crow soundtrack and stuff like that. Like, yeah, those are classic. Those that's one we'll have to do
Mm.
an episode for is soundtracks, not like just the score, but the actual like
Yeah, the soundtracks, all everything.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's what I how I wanted to start things off, and I'm just like, all
yeah.
right, but how can we sit there and do things different? How can we
Or
incorporate
horrorcore is
everything?
a great start because I feel
Yeah,
like for both of us, like that's something that like we, can connect to because we both definitely are fans of that subgenre.
yeah.
Um did so other than some of the ones we listed, were there any albums or artists that you also kind of thought about when you were thinking about this topic?
Like I said, there was so many other artists, but but like the main ones are ones that that I kind of like
Yeah,
was stuck to because that's how I was introduced to it. You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't know anything much about like some of the new guys, but there's like some of the top artists right now. There's a kid named Cemetery, and he kind of spells it with the S, like Pet Cemetery.
yeah.
And so like he's one of the like the big artists, and then so like I think there's Memphis Cult, Twisted and stuff like that. So I've been kind of
Hmm.
like listening to a lot of like different things, kind of like trying to sit there and get a different view on horrorcore
Yeah.
where it is
Does
now
it
today.
to you, does it sound different, the newer stuff versus like what we were listening to in the 90s and early 2000s?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because you have the twist of where it was. So it's like when we were growing up, it had that vibe of like 90s rap, you know what I mean? That style
Yeah.
and rap's not there anymore. So it's like right now you have a lot of the emo type rap that's kind of going on now. And so that's how the style's sounding a little bit. But actually I was actually listening to it like the Suicide Boys, but then it's like people say they're not horrorcore.
Hmm.
But you listen to some of their shit and it's like, okay, like how is this not? And then they say
Eh,
they're not,
yeah.
you know?
That's kind of weird.
And then they got that style that I think that Memphis style too. It's like
Yeah.
so sometimes it sounds like little 3 6 Mafia, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So with a little
Yeah.
mixture of everything. But that's the thing. Like I said, I don't want to sit there and label someone and say, oh, they're hardcore, and then it's like they're making songs like we're not hardcore. But
So Big L is also on some lists. And
yeah,
um, you know, Big L, rest in peace, one of the greatest freestyle artists of all time. Um, I never really thought of him as like that dark, but I was looking at some of his lyrics
yeah.
and he talks a little about, satanic shit and um stuff like that in some of his early stuff, especially like around the 90s.
Hmm.
I never really thought of him in that category, but Big L is like obviously an amazing artist that didn't really even get to reach his potential, unfortunately, before his death.
Yeah, and so that's the thing with that's how it's kind of missed because it's like a lot of his shit that he you listen to is underground, and then
Yeah,
it has the one album, like it wasn't really all the way completed like how he probably wanted it to be, but
yeah,
um yeah, so then whatever you leave behind is kind of is gonna put you what you're labeled as, so he did have some lyrics that definitely we're like, okay, but I think he came out and he said that, he started off like that, but that's like, the same way that Tyler, the creator, and them went.
yeah,
You start off making a few songs and then you move on. And I think that's what horrorcore is. And I think that some of the fans, kind of get a little upset because it's like they want that person to stay there and stay in that same genre. But then it's like the same thing like from me, I mean when a lot of rap artists came out, they're making mixtapes and then everything like that and then it's like after they make it big, they change up their whole style. They're not the
yeah,
same anymore.
yeah.
They sit there and go different ways and so you look at them like commercialized ways. It can be the same thing. Like look at Lil Wayne. He came in with that style and then it
He
just
was in the Hot Boys, man,
oh
with
yeah.
Juvenile. I
Cash
was a
Money, all of
huge
them.
fan of Cash Money
Yeah.
back in the day.
So
Um, Yeah.
you look at everything and how everybody
Yeah.
transitioned. Look at 50 Cent. Came in rapping a different way and then
Hmm.
took off somewhere else. And so it's like, I think fans, like, when a lot of people don't know about someone, they feel like real happy because they're like, oh man, I was down since day one, and then
Yeah.
like, oh, now he ain't the same because he's rapping about this and he's
Well,
rapping about that.
that describes me in like all genres of music I like. As soon as they get big, I tend to like lose interest in them. I like usually the styles that people make when they're not trying to get like that commercial fame. I feel like it's genuinely like more authentic to who that person is. But
But that's the thing
what
too.
you
It's
gonna do?
like
They got to make their money, so I can't blame them.
yeah, and then I think that the label itself can also be looked at like a horror movie itself because it's like you come in and you're
Sell
you,
your soul.
you're
Yeah,
giving yourself you, and then it's like now you're just sitting there trying to release things to try to please everybody, this
yeah,
like please a certain market, try to get there. You know what I mean? So it is what it
yeah.
is.
So, one of the artists, I think, to me personally, probably the most like notable artist, which we mentioned numerous times now, Gravediggaz.
Yeah,
Um, they've actually, from their first album to actually they're still releasing albums today. Well, parts of Gravediggaz are. They've changed from every single album. So the
yeah.
first album came out, I think, well, they formed in 94. I think 6 Feet Deep was, yeah, that was released in 94 as well. At the time was Prince Paul, Fruquan, Too Poetic, and RZA. And each
Hmm.
had their alter egos. So RZA was Resurrecta, Too Poetic was Grim Reaper, Prince Paul was Undertaker, and Fruquan was the Gatekeeper. Um, that album, obviously, 6 Feet Deep is like to me one of like the best albums, one of my favorites. Just perfect horrorcore album right there. The second album though was interesting. Did you listen to the Pick, the Sickle, and the Shovel?
Yeah. Yep.
So it takes like a different approach. It's like a little less like I don't know. I read somewhere it's less humorous. I don't even find the first one humorous, but
No, yeah.
it's just got a different style to it. It was more like storytelling, like different kinds of storytelling.
Hmm.
I guess like one of the songs is called Fairy Tales on it, and I guess that's kind of like summarizes almost the style of it. It's like they're telling like fairy tales throughout the whole thing. I
Hmm.
don't find it to be as good as 6 Feet Deep, even though I was still a fan of the album. Like there's some songs on there that I genuinely liked a lot. But overall, I didn't think it was as complete of an album. And then from there, they kind of just like continued to release things, but like um Poetic dies in 2001 of colon cancer, unfortunately. So, I think that kind of messes up the dynamics. Like Riz is not on a couple of the albums. Fruquan kind of does a solo thing, and then he's not included in one of the albums, and then he pairs up with Prince Paul on another album, I believe. So, like
Mm.
they kind of like are still creating music. Have you kept up with them at all recently?
No, I haven't really kept up on anything like that with that project or with
Yeah,
that whole group or anything like that because it's like I said, it's not like a subgenre that I would always just like kind of fall onto. It's like so it's like I know that people are gonna get at us like, oh well, it just talked about a lot of commercial guys and stuff like that. But when it goes into this, I don't really dig too deep into, you know, the subgenre
yeah.
of, where everybody is today. But
Hey,
I'm
we
like,
talked about what we know.
yeah.
Like that's the safer thing than to talk about a bunch of stuff we're not too familiar with. I did listen to the last Gravediggaz album release. That was
Mm,
Fruquan. Um, I believe him and maybe Prince Paul. I can't remember for sure. It was I genuinely enjoyed it. I mean, obviously it's not the same level of 6 Feet Deep, so you got to kind of go in knowing that because it doesn't have the same dynamic of all the players of the Gravediggaz at the time.
yeah.
But Fruquan still got he's still got some talent. He's still got a lot in him. He's been releasing things throughout, the years. So
Well, that's
um,
dope.
I would definitely check out his solo work and the newest releases of Gravediggaz if you guys are interested in the Gravediggaz in general.
There was another artist too, I think around like a little bit before, but around the same time, like it's Tyler the Creator, Hopspin. Remember him?
Not really, no.
Yeah, so I remember he used to have like the little contacts and everything like that. And this is
I
where
think I know who you're talking about. I don't like the name didn't sound familiar, but I definitely remember the contacts and all that.
but here's the thing too. It's like so like we talked about, we worked at a group home
Yep.
and together at group home, that's how we met. And so, our job is to kind of keep, entertainment, movies like this and like music away from kids, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that was our job at the time. But, I think one of the kids, when he would go home on pass and everything, he would sit there and listen to some of these artists. And then, like, whenever we were in like van ride or anything like that, I'd be like, "Oh, okay, but nah, buddy, we can't do
Yeah. What do
this.
you?
We can't do
What do
that."
you?
But those were some of the artists that,
Yeah.
the kids at the time were starting to name that they were kind of like listening to and doing things like that. Like what? And you can even like what? I don't even know, like Hollywood Undead and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
sure
I'm
if you
familiar
would.
with them a little bit.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think those, like I said, those are more like commercialized things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of going on. That's where we were with it, you know.
What about that other rapper who passed away a few years back, X Extension?
Yeah,
Would you
Tentacion.
yeah, yeah, would you consider him horrorcore?
So there's a thing too. So I would in a certain way, but that's the thing. It's like if you're a true fans of horrorcore, what are they gonna do? They're gonna sit there and say, okay, well, this is what it is and this is what it isn't. But him and Trippie Redd,
Yeah,
they have
Trippie
some
Redd does
songs.
Trippie
Yeah,
Redd even in his music videos,
yeah.
he
Hills
incorporates
Have
like
Eyes,
yeah,
Hills Have Eyes,
exactly.
and
Yep.
everything like that.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that I kind of picture things. It's like these guys are big fans of horror, and then sometimes just because they're not doing it all the time, they're getting everything. They're putting what how they feel
Mhm.
about horror into the music. It doesn't seem like they just have to be it all the time, but they have, that style in them. And
I
so that's
think
a
that yeah, and I think that like unfortunately they probably get lumped in with a bunch of artists of a different kind of genre.
yeah.
So I think that that probably makes them feel or like some people would exclude them. But I
Hmm.
absolutely I totally forgot about Trippie Redd and that whole connection to horror. That's a good example right there too.
Yeah.
Flatbush Zombies have been around for a long time,
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
and yeah, they definitely dabble in the horrorcore
Yeah.
genre. So that's another one that definitely people should check out if you're not familiar.
Yeah, definitely. Flatbush, those guys. Have you seen those guys live?
I no, I don't think so. I just like watch some of the music videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, some of the footage and stuff from their live shows were like crazy and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, so even if we're not like really in tune with all these artists and you're watching this video or you're listening to this video, hit us up, let us know someone that we have missed or someone that you think that we would enjoy listening to,
Yeah,
you know.
recommend an artist for sure. We're always looking to get into some new stuff. So
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like, we're not, like I said at the beginning and kind of saying through this whole thing, like we're not sitting there saying we know everything about horrorcore. We're getting the conversation started for people that don't know much about it. And so, hey,
I think we're gonna get some shit for not really talking about Tech Nine very much. I know you mentioned
I
him.
brought up Tech Nine, and then
Yeah,
and
but I think that he's got a big following within the horrorcore genre.
yeah,
I guess back in like 2009, Fangoria actually like uh kind of noted that like his album from 2001 being like iconic and like super influential in the genre.
hmm
I just unfortunately I never really got into Tech Nine. I've heard some songs where he was like included in the song with other artists, but I never really like listened to him just as like a solo artist.
yeah.
But that's my bad for not, not getting more
Strange,
involved with
strange,
that.
strange music. Like we rock with them, but it is what it is. It's like we're from East Coast, you know what I mean? So it's like sometimes certain music you venture out on certain things, you know what I mean? And then you listen to certain styles. I like West Coast music, 90s rap. I listen to
Yeah,
everything. And
yeah.
so it's just
Yeah.
like I'm down for whatever,
It
but
is funny though when you're in like a different like state or like a
yeah.
different place, like you might like start list. Like I remember when I was in California and YG was all over the radio while I was there. I was like, this is California music though. Like this, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm in California listening to this. But and like when I'm here, like I'll like he has a few songs on the radio more recent, and I'm like, it doesn't have the same feeling though. Like I still love his music, but it doesn't feel as cool as it did when I was driving in California.
That's what I'm
Um,
saying.
yeah, so it's
It's,
definitely. Wait,
it's
is the weekend horrorcore?
I don't
He's
know.
got the hills have eyes.
He likes horror.
He
He
does.
likes horror
He
movies,
was
and
on
so
the cover of Fangoria. I mean,
Yeah, I
I don't
feel as
know.
though that's what I'm saying. Like, you know what I mean? I feel as though if you have love for horror or anything else, because at the end of the day, like look at what
Dude,
the description of it is. It's so wide that you can kind of like fill in any category of it.
we
You know what I
didn't
mean?
we didn't even include, I know you were a huge fan of this album, the Freddy versus Jason album.
Oh yeah. Uh
Fabulous and
Fabulous and
Jadakiss.
Jadakiss. Yeah. But then it's
Totally forgot
like,
about that.
oh no, yeah, definitely, you know. And so, but that's the thing, and then you'll have people, they're not horrorcore. So it's like,
That album's horrible. Like if anybody wants to dispute that, listen to the album. It's like,
nah. And then that's the thing. That's why I'm saying the description of everything about horrorcore is horror related, themed, anything. Like that's what I'm saying. If we're really going to sit there and say, hey, Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fat Boys had something to do with it, and they made just one song each.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And they're big pioneers of hardcore. So it's like, why can't everybody just have like a little piece in it, you know?
yeah,
Like you ain't gotta be in it full time. You ain't gotta
yeah.
be full time, but it's like you put out a track or two that have elements of hardcore.
It's it's gonna make a Spotify horrorcore playlist at some point, so
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I
Even
don't know. I'm interested to see what people think about including such a wide variety of artists and albums. I'm interested to see if people like will give pushback to that or if
well, you
they
have to be real too. Like Billie Eilish. You know what I mean? Like she has certain shit. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm just being realistic. Like if
yeah,
we're all gonna touch on that type of stuff, it lands, it hits the checks on certain on boards and genres. I don't know.
yeah. All right. All right, we'll see what people think. I hope that, if you're listening and you have opinions, I hope you guys comment and let us know what you're thinking. Like Brandon said, recommend artists that we didn't mention that you think we need to be turned on to, all that stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the point of this, is just to start dialogue about music and genres and the same stuff that we talk about with movies. We're constantly talking about that. Like,
hmm
is this horror? Is what do you like the definition of horror is expanded so widely these days.
Yeah, because
So
it's the same situation with
yeah,
like look at elevated horror. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
you
Yep.
have certain people that sit there and say, "Hey, well, this isn't really this and this isn't really that." But guess what? That's opening the door to bigger stars and bigger, companies pushing this stuff, you know what I mean? And pushing horror to the next level. Do I love slasher films? Do I love all these other films? Yes, I do. Is elevated horror like on my top thing? Not at times, but I respect that they're it's helping push horror to the next level, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
So,
Yep. So
and
so yeah, take it
there
away,
you go.
Brandon. Take it away.
All right. So like I said, this was PVD Horror Radio, where we're gonna incorporate music with our love of horror. And so stay on the lookout for more episodes. We're gonna sit there and bring up a lot of different topics, different things that we love. So throw some things at us that you
Yeah.
may love about, music and stuff like that. Like, that we can sit there and talk about or, anything like that. So definitely reach out. Let's keep this going. I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode of this new series.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.
Takes a lot of love for a person to do